Hello guys, and welcome back to another episode. Today we are going to be looking at escape from try-hack-me. It is an active directory domain controller box, and we are going to solve the box using the unintended method. I'm sure write-ups are going to be out there of people solving the box using the intended method. One of them is IPSEC, but I just decided to do the write-up because the intended path makes the box to be a bit easier, because the steps between getting a user and a root, they are significantly reduced. So I will start off by getting a PDF file from an SMB share. The PDF file will contain a credential that will allow us to log into MSSQL server. Then from the MSSQL server, we are going to be using the function xp_dir_tree to leak the service account net NTLM version 2 hash. Then crack the hash using a John the Ripper to get the password for the service account. Then craft a silver ticket for the administrator user, log again back into the MSSQL server, enable xp_cmd shell, then get remote code execution on the application. After getting a shell using sliver, we'll notice that we have the s-impersonate privilege. So we are going to be using one of the exploits that came out like a month or 2 months ago. That is the godpotato exploit to get root on the box. So it's a really amazing box, and without much say, let's jump into the write-up. So as always, you're going to begin by performing an nmap scan of the box, and I'm going to be using the program nmap, then -sc to tell it to run default scripts, then sv to enumerate versions, then oa to tell it that it needs to save the output into a file. You can name it anything. Then lastly, we're supposed to specify the IP address of the box, which is 10.10.11.202. So I've already run this before, and if we look at the nmap results of the box, we'll see that we have a lot of ports that are open. Most notably, port 88 is open, and port 389, which indicates that probably you're actually dealing with an active directory domain controller box. Also, the thing that looks interesting is the MSSQL server. We're going to enumerate it later on, but it's something interesting to note when you're trying to do this box. So we'll start by enumerating the port 135 and 139. Those are the Microsoft Remote Procedural Calls port, and to do that, I'm going to be using a program called enum for Linux. So enum for Linux comes already pre-installed in Kali Linux. So enum for Linux. Then if I specify -h, you're going to get the arguments that we're supposed to use. So I'm going to be using -a, which is supposed to just perform all simple enumeration. Then I'm going to specify the IP address of the box, which is 10.10.11.202. So let's leave it running in the background. Then the next port that looks interesting, it's the ldap port. That is the lightweight directory access protocol port. Then to enumerate it, it's really simple. I'm going to be using another tool called ldapsearch. Then I specify a -X to specify a simple authentication, -H to specify the ldap URI. So here it is. Then next, I'm supposed to specify the search context, which is going to be base. Then specify naming context. So there it is. We get the naming context. So I'm just interested in the base one. So there it is. Then I'm going to specify a search space of sub. Then give it the base dn to use. So here it is. So, yeah, that looks correct. So as you can see, we can't be able to enumerate ldap because of one thing. It says that we require successful bind. So what this typically means is that we need to provide valid credentials for us to be able to access and enumerate ldap. And given the fact that we don't have any valid credentials, it appears to be a dead end. So the next thing you can actually do is to try and enumerate SMB, that is port 445. And for this, I'll use a tool called crackmapexec. So let me specify crackmapexec, then specify SMB, then the IP address of the box, which is 10.10.11.202, then the shares to tell it that I needed to enumerate the shares. So let me just leave that running, and we get an error that user session is deleted. So basically it hasn't worked. So let's try to perform guest authentication by specifying a user of guest, then a password of nothing. So let's leave that running in the background and see if you're going to get a successful authentication to the SMB share. Looking at the output, we see that it successfully authenticated to the SMB share. So right now, basically what it's trying to do is to actually dump the share. And as you can see, these shares look default except public. So public is not a default share. And as you can see from the permissions, we have read access. So if I go back to enum for Linux, you can see that the only thing that it was able to enumerate appears to be the domain seed. So here it is. So other than the domain seed, it wasn't able to enumerate any shares. And this is because of the fact that it doesn't do guest authentication by default. If you look at the help menu, you can see that enum for Linux specifies user of nothing and a password of nothing. That's the default. So let's try to specify a user of guest and a password of nothing to see if it can actually be able to dump the required information. So there it is. And this is where you need to understand how different tools works, because you might think it was a false negative whereby it wasn't able to enumerate the shares, but it's just that it was built different. Basically, you need to provide different arguments for the program to work. So let's go back to crackmapexec. The next thing that you want to do is to just enumerate this public share. And to do that, it's really simple. We can actually use a program called spider_plus, not even a program, but a module from crackmapexec. So I just need to specify spider_plus. There it is. And tell it that I need it to spider the shares and get me all information that, is available on that share. So it's going to save the output in a JSON format. Then you're going to use just JQ to make it pretty, then look at the results that it's going to identify. So there it is. It's right now it's trying to spider the shares. Then it's going to save the output in this file called CME, that is crackmapexec_spider_plus. So let's copy that file to our current working directory. So move this one to here. And then let me remove the files that are left in /temp. So I'm going to specify that. Then we're going to go to CME to just look at the results. So I'm going to cut the file, then pipe it to JQ dot. Sorry about that. The reason as to why it doesn't work is because we have two pipes. So if you look at these other shares, you'll see that they don't contain anything interesting, but the public share has a file called SQL server procedures.pdf. So what you can actually do is to just use a tool from Impacket called impacket-smbclient. So this is the tool to just get the file from the SMB share. So to do that, I'm going to specify impacket-smbclient. Then for the positional argument, it requires me to provide a domain, a username, and a password. So the domain is sql.htb. Then specify the username of guest at the IP address of the box, which is 10.10.11.202. Then a password of nothing. So it manages to log in, and if I do a help, you can actually see that we can use the shares command to list the shares. So let me do that. So let me do shares, and we see we get the shares. The share that I'm interested in is the public. So to be able to interact with the share, you're supposed to use the use command. So let me do use, then specify the share. There it is. And if I do an ls, you can see we have the file that crackmapexec was able to enumerate. So let me use the command get, then specify the file, and it was able to download the file. So right now, as you can see on my box, I have the file that I actually downloaded from the SMB share. So the first thing that I usually do is to run exif tool to see exactly if you can be able to enumerate any usernames from that file. So I'm just going to specify exif tool, then specify the file itself, and as you can see, it doesn't have any metadata that can enable us to identify who is the author of this specific PDF file. So basically that one hasn't worked. So let's just open up the file and see if we can actually be able to get anything interesting. So looking at the file, you can see it talks about some few accidents that happened on the SMB share. Then the other interesting thing that you can actually identify is the fact that we have a user called Ryan We also have a user called Tom, and if you go down here, you can see that we have a user called Brandon, Brandon.brown. So it says that you can do a mail to brandon.brown@sql.htb. So to confirm if this is a valid domain name, I'm going to be using a tool called kerbrute. So let me just open up Mozilla, then I can show you where exactly you can actually get the tool. So let's just give it a second for it to run. Then we are going to I'm going to open up uh, I'm going to open up a private browser, then type kerbrute, then type github to just get the tool. And while that is running, I'm just going to close this other window. Then let's just look at the results that we got. So here it is. This is the tool that you're supposed to use to enumerate kerberros. So let me just go to the GitHub page and let me zoom in a bit. So you can see that it's just a tool that is supposed to perform kerberros pre-authentication brute forcing. And if you look at the releases, here it is, you'll see that we have a binary that we can actually download. So given the fact that I'm on a 64-bit system, this is the binary that I usually download. Then we're going to use that binary to just, do, enumeration of kerberros. So for that to happen, I need to create a user file. So let me create a file called user, then specify a user of brandon.brown. Then I'm going to specify user of administrator, then specify a user of guest. Then finally, I'm going to specify a user of msrpc. Sorry about that. So basically, the reason as to why I'm specifying a user of msrpc is to ensure that we don't get any false positive. So because I'm sure that name doesn't exist on the box. So let's run kerbrute, then specify a user enum. So here is the flag. So basically it just enumerates valid domain username using kerberros. So user enum, then again if I do a -h, you'll actually see I'm supposed to specify a --dc, which is the KDC. That's the Active Directory Domain Controller itself. So it's supposed to be having an IP address of 10.10.11.202. Then specify a -d for the domain, which is supposed to be sql.htb. Then lastly, I'm supposed to specify a user word list. So that is user. So after running it, you can see that it was able to identify that there are 3 valid usernames. And as you can see, musioka.ian is not a valid username. Basically, it doesn't appear on the list. But brandon.brown is a valid username on this specific box. So right now, what we can actually do is to try to probably perform a brute force because we don't have a password for this user. And as you can see, Active Directory, kerbrute itself wasn't able to identify that it doesn't require any pre-auth. So basically, you can't do an srep roasting attack because kerbrute by default it actually does that check. But as you can see, it wasn't able to dump any hashes from kerberros. So but I'm not going to be doing any sort of brute force because I'm not exactly sure if we can actually lock out accounts. So to check if that is a possibility, I can actually still use crackmapexec. Then let me go back to get the exact command that we can use from crackmapexec. So right now, instead of specifying that command, I'm just going to specify --pass then -pol. So basically, it's just going to enumerate the password policy that the Active Directory domain controller has. So let's leave it running and see if we are going to get any password policy. But as you can see, this one doesn't work. So we were not able to enumerate the password policy of this specific domain controller using the guest account. So it appears to be a dead end. But if we go back to our PDF, you will see that, as a bonus, it says that for new hires, those who are still waiting for their users to be created and permissions assigned, can sneak a peek at the database using the user of public user, then the password of guest user can't write one. So, this is supposed to be a password for the MSSQL. Remember, before we said that there was an MSSQL server running on the box, so we can actually try to connect to it and see if we're actually going to get anything interesting. And to do that, I'm going to be using another program from Impacket. So Impacket is a suite of tools that are used to enumerate and exploit Active Directory domain controllers. So you need to understand exactly how to use them if you're going to be working and trying to do a pen test on an Active Directory domain controller. So the tool is Impacket, then specify MSSQL client. Then I'm supposed to specify the domain of SQL.htb, then specify the user of public user, as you can see from this file. So let me just copy the user, then go back, put it in at the IP address of the box 10.10.11.202. Then it's going to request for a password. So let me just copy it from here. Then you're going to specify this specific password. So let's specify the password and see if we can actually log in, and it works. We actually log in into the server. And if I do something like a select one, I think it should work and give me one. Yes, here it is. So basically we're able to run SQL commands on this specific server. But right now, if I type help, you can see that we have some specific commands. One of them is xp_cmd shell. So if you have this, if you have the required privileges, you can actually execute command using this function on the server. But as you can see, it says that the execute permission was denied on the object xp_cmd shell. So basically it means we weren't able to execute that function on this SQL server because of our permissions. So the next thing that you can actually try to do is to try to see if there are any databases that might contain things like credentials that can give you other access on this system, but that is actually dead and it doesn't work on this system. So what we were supposed to actually do was to use use this SQL prompt, then use the function xp_dir to actually link the service account for this specific system. And to do that, I'm just going to specify xp_dir, then specify tree, then I'm going to specify an IP address. So I'm going to specify an IP address of my box. So let me get it. ifconfig turn0. So here it is 10.10.14.102. Then I'm supposed to specify a share that does not exist. So there it is. So before I actually run the command, I need to set up responder. So to set up responder, I'm going to use the command sudo, then specify responder, then specify -i for turn0. So I is the interface, then I'm just going to be putting my password, and then it's going to run in the background. Then the next thing that I'm going to do is to just run the command. So if I go back to my responder, you can actually see I was able to link the net NTLM version 2 hash for the service account SQL_SVC. So what we can actually try to do right now is to take this hash. Then what I'm going to do is to specify a file called hash, save the hash, then we're going to try and crack using John the Ripper. So to try and crack it, I'm just going to specify John, then -- word list, then I'm going to specify the rocky word list. Mine I've saved in boxes, then word list, then rocky.txt. Then lastly, I'm going to specify the hash. So it's going to take a second to crack. Then you're going to see if you're going to get the password for that specific service account. So as you can see, after a few seconds, we get that the password for SQL_SVC is Reggie1234 Ronnie. So let me just save these credentials because we're actually going to need it later on. So it's supposed to be vim, then creds. So it's going to be SQL_SVC, then colon the password. So there it is. So if I cut creds, you can see we have the creds that we managed to crack from this specific system. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to exit again from SQL server, then try to log in with those credentials. So it's going to be SQL_SVC. Then I'm going to specify the password that I have on my clipboard, and you can see it says that login failed for the user SQL_SVC. So let me put the correct credentials, and it still doesn't work. So let me confirm that my clipboard has the correct password, and yes, indeed it has the correct credentials. So let's look at the help menu for MSSQL client, and as you can see, we are able to specify a flag of Windows-auth. So if I go back to the PDF, there is a place that they talked about Windows auths, whereby it says, let me see if I can actually find it. It talks about, specify Windows authentication, and you should be good to go. So here it is. So basically, let's try to specify that flag on our impacket script to see if it will actually now be able to allow us to log in. So here it is, Windows-auth. Then let me cut creds to get the correct password. Then we can try to perform a login again. So here it is. So let me try to log in again, and it works this time. And if we type and help again, let's get the xp_cmd shell. So here is the command. Then try to run who am I to see who am I. So we see, even if, we have the password for the service account, still we don't have the necessary permissions to be able to execute xp_cmd shell. So to mitigate this, what we are supposed to do is to perform something known as a sliver ticket attack, whereby given the fact that we have the correct credentials for the service account, we just forge a ticket for the administrator, then try to log into MSSQL. And to do this, we are going to be using another impacket program. This is why I actually say that impacket is one of the most useful tools whenever you're trying to enumerate any Active Directory domain controller. So I'm going to specify impacket, then specify a tool called ticketer. Here it is, and basically, as you can see from the help menu, it says that it creates a kerberros golden/sliver ticket based on user options. So to do that, what I actually need to provide as the positional argument is the target. This is the username for the newly created ticket, so that's supposed to be administrator. Then after that, I'm supposed to specify an SPN, that is the service principal name. So I'm going to specify the service principal name for MySQL. And to get the SPN for MySQL, it can actually be a couple, but there are some that are usually, mostly used. So let's just specify MSSQL SPN kerberros. So there it is. We're going to get a Microsoft article. So here it is. So let me just open it up. Then we are going to look at it. So if we go down, you can actually see that, these are the specific SPN formats that MSSQL can use. So let me just copy it. So this is what we need for the SPN. Let me go back to my prompt. Then to specify an SPN, I need to specify the port for MSSQL, which is 1433, then specify the fully qualified domain name. That is supposed to be dc.sql.htb. And if you're wondering where exactly I got the fully qualified domain name, if you go back to the nmap results, you can see here it is. So this is where I got the fully qualified domain name. So after specifying the SPN, the next thing that I need to provide is the domain name. So that is -d. That is supposed to be sql.htb. Then the next thing that I need to specify is the user ID. Basically, it's just supposed to be, the default is 500 because that's supposed to be the RID for the admin user. So user-id, I think that's correct, it's supposed to be 500. Then the next thing that I need to provide is supposed to be the domain seed. So to get the domain seed, this can actually be gotten from our enum for Linux script. So if we go up, you can actually see that here is the domain seed. So this is one of the ways that you can actually get the domain seed of a box. So let's go back and specify it. And I'm just going to be showing you the other way that you can actually get the domain seed of a box. And to do that, I'm going to use another tool from Impacket called lookup seeds. So let me just get the credential for SQL_SVC. Then I'm supposed to use SQL, then lookup seeds, then specify the domain of SQL.htb. Then the next thing I'm supposed to specify the username, that is supposed to be SQL_SVC at the IP address of the system, which is 10.10.11.202. Then specify the password. Then it's going to try and dump the domain seed with other information. So as you can see here is still the same domain seed that we initially got from Enum for Linux. Then I was just trying to show you that, but basically we actually don't need that right now. Then lastly, what if I do a -h again, you'll see that we need to provide an NT hash. So here it is, we need to provide an NTLM hash for the service account. So to do that, I'm going to go online, then type NTLM hash, then generator, to actually get an online tool that generates NTLM hashes. So I'm just going to pick the first one. Then the next thing that I need to do is to specify the password for the service account. Then it's going to generate the NTLM hash. So here it is. So let's go back to our prompt. Then specify -nt hash, and specify the hash that we copied. So after that, we get an error saying that ambiguous option -d used, because it's not supposed to be -d, it's supposed to be -domain. So let me specify it again. So it's supposed to be domain. So there it is. So there it is. It was able to craft a silver ticket. Then the next thing that we need to do is to just import this ticket. And to import it, I'm going to be using the command export, then specify. So even before we import the ticket, I'm just going to type klist, and you're going to see that we don't have any tickets right now in our session. So it says that no credential caches were found. So let's do an export, then specify krb, then specify 5 ccname equals admin.cc cache. So there it is. So we've managed to import that ticket, and to confirm if it works, I'm going to be using klist again. And as you can see, we managed to import the ticket successfully. So the next thing that I need to do is to use the ticket, and I'm going to use it, on impacket-mssql client. Then the next that I need to specify is administrator at sql.htb, which is supposed to be our domain. Then specify -k to tell impacket-mssqlclient that I need to use kerberros. Then lastly, the option -no-pass to tell you that I don't need it to prompt me for any password. So let's try to run it again. And as you can see right now, we get an error saying that no named service, name or service not known. And this is because we haven't specified our domain names in etc host file. So basically right now, Impacket doesn't know what exactly sql.htb is. So let's just specify it in our host file. So here it is. So it's supposed to be 10.10.11.202. Then specify sql.htb. Then specify, let's first of all just do that, then see if it's going to work. So if I cut, right now, okay, let me see where my pen went. So if I cut, then specify host, you can see we have sql.htb present. So before exiting, if I go back, then try to run the same command again. Let's give it a second and see if it's going to work. it still gives us an error saying that pre-authentication information was invalid. Remember, we used the fully qualified name of dc.sql.htb, so I think I have to specify it here, then even add that specific host name to my etc host file. And to do that, let's just add it. So it's going to be dc.sql.htb. So there it is. Then let's try to run it again and see if it's going to work. We get the login is from untrusted domain and cannot be used with integrated authentication. So basically, this is one of the most annoying error that I got. And to debug it was actually a pain on my end. And the reason is because whenever you're trying to specify this host name, you're supposed to specify the fully qualified domain name before you specify the domain name of the box. So there it is. So right now, if I save that script and try to run it again, you'll actually see okay, that it doesn't work. I don't know why, because it's supposed to work. So let me specify sql.htb as the domain, then try it again. Still, I'm getting the same exact error as before. So let's look at etc hosts again. So 10.10.11.202 dc.sql.htb, then specify sql.htb. It looks correct. So I'm still getting the same error, and I'm not exactly sure why. Let me run it again. It still gives me the same error. So what if we try to provide Windows Auth? Okay, sorry about that. Still, it gives me that error that it can't authenticate from that. So MSSQL administrator at dc.sql.htb -k-no pass. So this was working before. I'm not exactly sure why it isn't working as of now, but this stuff always happens. So let's go back to see exactly how we generated the ticket to see if the information is actually valid. So let me confirm that, first of all, let me remove this port because I don't think we actually do need it. So let me specify domain. It is. Then again, export the ticket, then do a key list. It still works. Then try again to log into the server and see if it's going to work. So still it gives us the same error. So if I go back, then type a -h, you'll see that it says that we are supposed to provide the fully qualified domain name. So instead of providing sql.htb, what if we try to provide dc.sql.htb? So dc.sql.htb. Okay, it gives us an error because of the -h flag. Then it saves the ticket. Then let's export it again, then do a key list. There it is. Then again, try to log into MSSQL server. So still it fails to work. So let me again access this file. Then let's just remove this one here. Then try it again. Still I'm getting the login is from untrusted domain and cannot be trusted. So if that fails, there's an option whereby you can actually request a ticket from the DC itself. So if I do a -h, sorry about that, you'll see that we can use request to request the ticket from the domain controller and clone and to request a domain the ticket from the domain controller. So let's just try that and see if you're going to get anything else. So dash request, then it requires us to specify a dash user, which is supposed to be SQL_SPC. Then the password, let me copy it from here, cut creds to get the password. So here it is. Then let's try it again. Then we get the wrong realm has been provided for the domain reserved for future use. So let's just remove the fully qualified domain name and leave it as that. Then again try it. So SQL.htb, it's unknown. Let's go back, then specify SQL.htb. SQL.htb. Then let's try it again. So right now we are getting an error saying that KRB AP error skew. It says that clock skew is too great. So kerberros is a time-based authentication protocol whereby we need to be within the 5 minutes of the time that the Active Directory domain controller is. So to rectify this, I'm going to be using the command sudo, then ntpdet, then specify the IP address, which is 10.10.11.202. Then let me authenticate. Then it says that the time was changed. Then let's try the same thing again. We still get an error that error principal unknown, server not found in kerberros DB. So let's go back, generate the ticket again without this request. And for the domain, let's just specify SQL.htb. Then it saved the ticket again. Let me do a list. The ticket seems to be valid. So let's again try to authenticate to the MSSQL server and see if it's going to work. And finally it works. I think the reason as to why it was failing was because of one thing. The clock skew was too great, but impacket wasn't actually giving me the exact error, because right now, as you can see, it has worked. And right now, if we again type a help command, given the fact that this is we've used kerberros authentication to authenticate to the application, that's number one. And number two, it's a silver ticket for the administrator. So basically, xp_cmd shell is actually supposed to work. So to confirm this, if I type xp_cmd shell, then type who am I, we get an error saying that server blocked access to procedure xp_cmd shell. So to be able to access it, we need to actually enable it. And to enable it, we're going to be using the command enable_xp_cmd shell, and it has enabled it. Then if we type who am I, you can actually see that we are able to execute command on that system. So if I type something like an ipconfig, you'll actually see that it works. ipconfig. So here it is. We actually have the IP config of the system, right now. So we can actually get remote code execution on the application. So the next thing that I need to do is to get a shell using sliver, and I'm going to just start sliver by specifying sliver server. So here it is, and if you type help, you can see that you can create a new operator using the command new operator. So new operator, then I'm going to type a -h to get the arguments that I'm going to use. So I'm supposed to specify -lhost, then get the IP address of my box. So here it is. Then specify it. Lport, I'm going to leave it as is. Then the name of the operator, so --name, it's supposed to be musioka, then -s to save it in a file called musioka.conf. So there it is. Then I'm going to enable multiplayer. Then I'm going to start up a silver client. And if I do a -help, you can see we can actually import client configuration. And if I type an ls, you can see that we managed to create that configuration file. So let me just import it using the command import, then specify the configuration file, and it says that it was imported successfully. So right now, if I run sliver-client, you can see that we managed to access the client of the system. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to generate an implant. Basically, an implant is like support. Let me just say it's a reverse shell that can allow us to, communicate with the system. So to do this, what I'll need to do is to use the command generate, then specify a -h to get the argument. So I need a beacon. So here it is, whereby it's supposed to generate a beacon binary. Then the next thing that I need to specify is --mtls, which is just supposed to be the IP address of my box. So that is mutual TLS, whereby it's supposed to use mutual authentication. So there it is. Then the next thing I'm supposed to specify is --OS, which is supposed to be Windows. --architecture is supposed to be AMD64. Then lastly, I'm going to specify --skip-symbol. So this is just going to tell Sliver that, what I need you to skip is authentication. So to do this, it's supposed to be simple. Sorry about that. That's my alarm. So let me just switch it off. Then we can continue with the walkthrough. So sorry about that. So let me just specify skip symbol to tell it to not perform any obfuscation. And the reason as to why I'm specifying that, it's because this server doesn't have antivirus. So basically we don't have to do any obfuscation. So let me just run it right now. Then it says compiler. So I think I specified something wrong. It's supposed to be Windows. So there it is. It's actually now generating the implant. So it's going to take a couple of seconds, then it's going to work. Then while that is happening, I'm just going to specify MTLS to enable a listener, an MTLS listener. So it's going to take a while to come back. So instead of just waiting for it, what I'm going to do, as you can see, Enum for Linux is still running, which is still okay. But once it generates that sliver shell, we need to actually execute it from the box. And to do this, it's really simple. I'm just going to execute it from my box. I'm going to set up an SMB server. Then the SMB server, what it's going to do is host the binary. Then I'm going to connect to my SMB share, then execute the binary from my box instead of downloading it. So to do that, I'm going to be using the command impacket, then SMB server. Then I'm going to specify the share name of server, specify the share name of test, specify the share directory of PWD, that's the current working directory. Then I'm going to specify -smb2 support, then specify a username of test, then the password of test. So there it is. So it says that address is already in use because something is listening on port for 445. So that's responder. So let's try to run it again after closing responder, and as you can see, it works. So if we go back to our box, then the next thing that I'm supposed to specify, it's supposed to be net use, then specify h:, that is the share name, then specify my IP address. So let me get it. Here it is. Then specify the share name of test. Then specify the file that was created. If I go back, you can see that it created a file called elegant-shred.exe. So this is the beacon that we created. And if I do an ls, you can see that it actually exists. So here it is. this is the binary that is supposed to give us a reverse shell. So if I go back, then specify that. We don't even have to specify that right now. Let's just try to mount the share. So we've specified the share, then specify dash user of test, then the password of test. So there it is. Let's see if it's going to complete it successfully, and it says that it completed successfully. So we've actually managed to mount that share. So to interact with the share, I'm going to be using command H, then dash, then specify the binary that we want to execute. So there it is. It's actually going to take a while for the beacon to come back because of one thing. The reverse shell is actually huge. So if I do a du -hs, then specify elegant, you can see that the binary is 9 MB. So to copy that, to execute that binary from a remote, it's actually going to take a long time. So what I'm going to do is to just pause the video. Then once we get the beacon back, we are going to, continue with the video. So after a few, let me say like 1.5 minutes, we get a beacon from the server. And if I do beacons, you can see that the beacon is actually alive. So to interact with the beacon, I'm going to be using the command use, then specify the beacon. And if I type info, you can see that it's a beacon for the user SQL_SVC. It's on a Windows box. The version is Windows Server 2016, build 17763. So what I need to do next is to get an interactive shell. And to do that, I'm just going to type the command interactive. It's going to take another 1 minute or so to come back. So I'm going to pause the video. Then once the second session comes back, we are going to continue with the walkthrough. So after about 30 seconds, I got the session. And if I do a session, so you can see that the session is alive. Then to interact with the session, I'm again going to use the command use, then specify the session. So if I type, ls, let me just type pwd, you can see we are in Windows system 32. If I type a cd, then type an ls, you can actually see we are able to interact with the system. So if I use one of the Armory tools, that is the sa-whoami, we are going to see the kind of privileges that we actually have right now in this specific system. So the one that looks interesting is the sc-impersonate privilege. Basically, this is almost always a privilege escalation vector. And if we go online right now, then type godpotato, there it is, then type github. This is actually one. So Windows has actually been patching it since time immemorial. So basically they patch an impersonate privilege vulnerability, then after that hackers find a different way of being able to exploit that same bug. So this was another vulnerability that was discovered in, let me say, April of 2021. So it's just 2 months old. I believe the time when this box was released, these exploits still wasn't available. That's why actually this is an unintended method, because the previous s-impersonate privilege exploits actually didn't work. The other one that worked is called petit potam, if I'm not wrong. So let me just, I hope I spelled it correctly. So petit potam, then let me type sc impersonate, then type github. I hope I spelled it correctly, but here it is, petit potato. Sorry about that. I'm not exactly sure if it's petit potato or it's just petit potato, but this is another exploit that works. So it's another local privilege escalation by abusing impersonate privileges. So basically here it is. But for this specific walkthrough, I'm going to be using this godpotato. So here it is. And let me just download the .NET version 4 of the program. So to download it, I'm just going to copy the link. Then the next thing that we need to do is to go back here. Then I'm going to type wget, then specify the file that we need to download. So basically it has worked. Then let me just give it a simpler name. So it's supposed to be godpotato. Then let me name it to potato.exe. So there it is. Then to execute it, I'm going to be using a function called execute assembly. Then what it requires me to provide is the file path. So if I type armory, let me just type an armory so that you can know exactly what execute assembly is. It takes a while for it to index the armory. Then we get the files. So if I look at execute assembly, so let me just do that so that it appears a bit pretty. Then let's go back up. Then let me find execute assembly so that you can actually look at what exactly it's supposed to do. I think it should be here if I'm not wrong. But basically, you know what it does, it's simple. It just does, I think, reflective loading if I'm not wrong. So if I type that execute assembly, this is execute shellcode. So it loads and executes .NET in a child process. So basically, it just loads a .NET binary from our box. So to execute it, what I need to do is to provide execute assembly, then get the path. So this is my path. So here it is. Then specify potato.exe. Then just run it and see exactly what we are going to get. It says that it requires me to provide the arguments. So let me provide arguments of cmd. So the argument is just supposed to be -cmd. Then I'm going to specify who am I. So as you can see, it says that we are anti-authority system. So here it is. This means that we managed to escalate our privileges successfully. And you know, the next thing that I can try to do is to again load the binary that I initially created. So here it is. Let me try to load this binary to get a shell as the system user. So let's try to execute it and see if we're actually going to get a beacon. It's going to take a second because, as I said, the binary is actually large, but it's going to work nonetheless. So as you can see, we managed to get a beacon on the box. And you know, let me just close it up and open it up. And if I type beacons, you can see right now we have two beacons. One is for the user SQL_SVC. Then the second beacon is for anti-authority system user. So let's interact with that beacon. So use, then specify 0e. Then if I type info, you'll notice that it's for the anti-authority system user, and still it's the same server. So let's do interactive to get an interactive shell. So it's going to take a minute to run. Then we are going to continue with the walkthrough. So after about a minute, we get another session. And if I type sessions, you can see now we have two sessions. So I'm going to use the df session because that's the admin session. And if I type info, it's for the anti-authority system user. So the next thing we can do is actually get a shell on the system. It's going to take a while. And we have a shell. So if I type who am I, it's the anti-authority system user. So if I do a cd users, then type an ls, you can go to cd ryan.cooper, then type an ls, then cd desktop, then type an ls. You can actually see we can read user.txt. So if I cut user.txt, you can get the user flag. Then if I go to administrator, then desktop, then type an ls, we have the root.txt that I can actually cut. So let me cut it again, root.txt, and we have the root flag of the system. So basically we managed to solve this specific box. So this is how you're supposed to actually solve the box. I hope you've actually learned something through the walkthrough. I'm not going to go through the intended path, but I believe once IPSEC releases a write-up, I can just include it in my description below so that you can actually check the intended path of doing the box. So I hope you've enjoyed the walkthrough. If so, you can actually clap for me down below. and you can actually follow me, you know, and also subscribe to the channel so that you actually don't miss any content that might be coming up. So thank you so much for listening. Till next time, it's goodbye.